Okay, guys, so today we're going to be talking, we're going to be speaking on today's Bible study. Today's Bible study topic is titled Learning to Not Always Be Right. So, what does that mean? This can be rephrased in multiple different ways. One of the ways I'll rephrase it is being humble, right? And part of being humble is just knowing when to stop speaking in a lot of instances. It's knowing when our mouths should be shut instead of continuing to talk, which is something we all struggle with, probably me more than others. I'm a big debater, um, right? So getting into that, there's gonna be multiple examples I'm gonna make throughout the study, but the first one I'll start off with making is one from two from my personal life so far, right? Um, The first one is about me and a friend. This friend's name, I call him Zeke. We were having an argument about something really silly and fun spirited, right? Just a disclaimer: this argument wasn't a situation of an argument being had in bad faith. What do I mean by bad faith? An argument in bad faith is simply when an argument in bad faith is simply when someone, for example, they're doing it out of the sake of just trying to argue, like, and not even in a good way, in a sense of I want to have a fight with you. We're gonna fight about this, even if you're right, even if I'm wrong, vice versa. We're gonna argue, right? So that's what the whole purpose of this is. Anyway, me and Zeke get into a fight about Pokemon, right? And I shouldn't even say a fight, an argument, right? We were talking about whether or not a Pokemon named Tropius can fly. Any of you who are Pokemon nerds, you know what Tropius is. It's a flying type Pokemon. And not only could it fly, but could it fly with someone on top of its back. That is the argument we were getting into. Um, right? And that's a situation of an argument that is trivial, right? And in that situation of an argument, we should not continue to argue if one of us is clearly getting mad or if one of us clearly is not doing it out of the sake of good faith, right? Um, Now, in that argument, me and Zeke both believe we were right. Both of us 100% believed that we were right. We both had 100% faith in us, in one of us being right. Um, that's a situation where you can learn to be humble. Since it was a situation of us trying to have an argument for the fun and just joking around, right? It wasn't necessary, but there will be times where it is necessary, right? And that was example number one. Example number two, I was debating with another acquaintance of mine. I don't want to say friend because here's the thing: this person and I are not extremely close. I do know a lot about them. They know a lot about me, but I would not say friend. And the reason I wouldn't say friend is because this isn't someone who, and this is important too, who we categorize as friends and who we categorize as acquaintances. This isn't someone who I would say I would confide to or go to advice. I consider that someone who is a friend, right? Do I not love this person? No, I love this person, but I don't think that it would be smart and wise of me to consider them a friend. Um, Anyway, the second person I was debating, and this was a acquaintance of mine, on whether or not a fetus is a growing organism, right? So for those of you who don't know, that's basically code for is abortion wrong, is abortion right, right? This is a situation of, or basically in other words, is a baby alive even before we consider it a full-formed baby? This is an example of a situation where I know I'm right, and I'm not right because I think I'm right, or because I believe I'm right, or because I make a amazing argument that says I'm right. No, I'm right because this is God's truth, and God ordained it so. And this is a situation where we don't need to back down and be humble. Well, we could be humble, but we don't need to back down what we're saying, right? There's situations where you don't need to say anything in an argument. Like, for example, someone argues with you and you just need to stop arguing with them and leave them alone and walk away. But this is a situation where we state God's truth and walk away, right? And the first example, that would be a situation where I don't need to continue arguing because I'm not talking about God's truth or anything that pertains to what I believe. I'm simply talking about an opinion I have with another person. It's two opinions clashing, right? No one needs to be right in that situation, especially if someone's emotions or feelings are on the line because they are upset that you disagree with them, right? Um, so yeah, in those situations, we have to decipher, is this important and why is it important? And obviously, in a situation where you're talking about God, it's important they know the truth. Now, you don't need to shove it down their throat because I promise you that's not going to work. Some people have some amazing regurgitative abilities and they can regurgitate what they hear out of their ears and out of their throat. It's not going to work. I promise you it's not. If they don't want to hear it, it's not going to work. So give up on that. Tell them God's truth and leave it at that. If you're arguing about two opinions and it gets heated, drop it, right? It's all about being humble and knowing when to quit and knowing when to. And the thing is this: you have to constantly be thinking when you talk to people. And it is a little difficult, right? Because sometimes you drift off into thought or you don't think too much when you engage this conversation. But as a follower of Christ, you're called to pay attention. right? You're called to pay attention to how people speak to you and who's speaking to you, right? Um, these are two examples of the topics. Um, well, this is one of the examples was a topic that was trivial, and the other was not trivial. It was important, right? Um, the example where I talked to my friend was trivial. Doesn't matter who's right. Doesn't matter who's wrong, right? Even if I'm right, even if he's right, doesn't matter. Um, the second example I gave is not about being right. It's about sharing God's truth, right? And what is God's truth? God's truth is whatever He ordains to be so. So basically, when God says that we are only to have a wife and a husband, respectively, to the sexes, male and female, male, female, female, male. When we go off and find a partner, that is what He means. He ordained it so. It is not a situation of where I'm right because I say I'm right. It's because God's right, right? And that's the thing. You have to be careful who you get into arguments with. It is one thing to inform somebody an argument, then leave. It's another thing to have to stick in that argument and stay and defend it. There's certain times where you don't need to defend what you have to say. You just need to say it and then leave. And there's certain times where you do defend it because you understand this person is a person of common sense and they're not going to try to do something extra in an argument. For example, they're not going to go around the workplace because I don't know. And I'm not. This isn't anything that's happened to me, but I'm just giving examples that I know I've heard from people. They're not going to go around the workplace and spread your name in a bad way, saying, "Oh, this person believes this and that and the third, and they hate this people and da 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 da." Right? Or hey, Andrew said this, and he tells it to the whole school or whatever, right? Like I said, this isn't anything that's happened to me, but this is something I've definitely seen happen to other people, right? We have to be careful how we express our faith and who we express our faith to. And I shouldn't say who we express our faith to, but how we express it to them, right? Because some people are just looking for arguments, right? And something to go into deeper, um, right, is who we share arguments with, right? We need to be careful. And we still also need to be careful even when not sharing God's truth. So even when you're not sharing the truth about God, still be careful because there are some people who will simply argue with you just to argue. I promise you that is the case. And to prove my point, I will give you an example. I will give you two examples in the Bible, two examples in real life. I'll give you an example from the Bible, since that is real life, and I'll give you an example from my life, right? So getting into that, Jesus was considered the teacher and a prophet, as well as the Messiah, which we know in his time period. But whenever the Pharisees saw Jesus, they would make fun of him. They would taunt him by calling him good teacher. That was a taunt to him. That was them simply saying that he was a teacher and nothing more, right? That was their way of getting at him. They would listen in on what he had to say. Listen to this. These leaders, these spiritual leaders, not spiritual leaders, well, I guess no, yeah, spiritual leaders, they would waste their time. And I say waste because really they should have been doing other things. If they considered themselves to be the people they did, they wouldn't have to waste time learning from Jesus. But it was good that they did hear what he had to say because he was telling them what they knew was wrong, and it was. But moving on, and it's different for Jesus because Jesus was absolutely perfect as a person. He was not me. Me, I would mess up multiple times doing what Jesus did. We all would. The smartest of us would mess up because we can say things wrong. We can make mistakes. It takes a lot of practice and patience to do what Jesus did, right? Anyway, the Pharisees, whenever they had the chance, would listen in on Jesus. They would listen in on him just to try to argue with him. They would listen on what he had to say just to argue with him. They would hear what he said. Hey, you said this. So how do you feel about that? Oh, okay. Well, what about this then? Oh, well, no, we don't agree with that. The Bible says this. Oh, really? Like they would just talk to him just to argue. And out of bad faith too. They weren't trying to do this to learn. They weren't trying to do this to understand. They were doing it because they didn't agree with him and they wanted him to wanted to make him look stupid. And they wanted to actually kill him too. They were hoping that he would say something wrong so they would have a reason to kill them, which he never did. So, my point. Um, yeah, this is an example, a perfect example of how people will look for fights and arguments just for the sake of it, and not only just to make themselves look smarter than you, just to make you look bad. They can also do it to harm you, really harm your reputation. Now, obviously, not everyone's arguing for the sake of trying to kill you, but back then, that's what they were doing. And in today's society, I guess people argue with you just for the sake of trying to ruin your reputation, which is still a pretty big thing. Don't get me wrong, ruining someone's reputation is very serious and detrimental. But in doing so, the Pharisees ruined their reputation, right? When people argue with you for no reason and you don't succumb to that and give in, they look stupid. When you argue with them, you both look stupid. You both look dumb now. Your what's the word? Your reputations are both ruined, right? Jesus didn't do that. He argued when he did to, and there were times when he didn't, right? An example I'll give from my life. There was a person I know who we're gonna call Victoria, and she had a personal problem, a vendetta with me. This was because she knew I was openly Christian, and because I was also openly against homosexuality. in homosexual relationships, right? Her and a group of friends also dislike me for the same reason, which I could go bounds deep into why it's silly to dislike someone because someone else dislikes somebody. That makes no sense. Um, Maybe we can talk about that later. But anyway, yeah, as I was saying, um, whenever, and I mean whenever she got the chance to disagree with me and argue, she would take it. It was like fish to bait. It's actually insane thinking about it. Thinking back on it, regardless of who was right or wrong, didn't matter. There was no, even if there was no point to the argument, it did not matter. If I was right, if I was wrong, if she was right, if she was wrong, didn't matter. She just wanted to argue, and it was all for the sake of starting an argument, starting a fight, and trying to make me look bad. Which eventually led to her looking bad because she did this constantly with not just me, other people. She did it a lot with me, like a lot with me, but she looked stupid because not only did she like talk about how she did this, that's the thing too. She talked about it a lot. She talked about it very openly. She wasn't secretive about it. So eventually a lot came to light that she was just doing this for the sake of doing it and people didn't like her anymore. But that's a whole different story for another day. The point is this: you need to be very careful of who you argue with. And not even this, beyond that, another lesson we can learn from this is we need to be careful who we surround ourselves with. Jesus did not surround himself with people like the Pharisees. He surrounded himself with people who he knew would listen. And that's not to sit there and say that you only surround yourself with people who listen. But when I say listen, I mean people who wanted to learn, people who wanted to actually be there. He didn't surround himself with people who wanted to argue. He surrounded himself with people who wanted to be there and wanted to learn and wanted to understand. So when you pick friends, don't just pick friends because you enjoy yourself a little bit every once in a while. Pick friends that you know that you can trust to some extent, right? If you want to talk to your friends and debate with your friends, like that's another thing too. Pick friends who you know you can have an actual deep, meaningful conversation with. Don't just pick friends who only want to sit there and have meaningless conversations. Pick good friends. That is why it's very, very, very important who you pick friends with. We downplay so much the people we become friends with or the people we even hang out with, right? We downplay it a lot. We downplay it and say, nah, they don't influence me to do that. I have my own decision on what I want to do. Yeah, 100% you do. But guess what? You as a human, since you are human, will be influenced by who you hang out with, right? Whether it be the clothes, the way you talk, the things you say, the things you think, whatever, the jokes you make, right? We all know that when we're in a certain friend group, there are certain jokes we do make and don't make. And for those of you who are being 100% honest, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When you're with certain friends, there's stuff you will never say. And when you're with other friends, there's stuff you'll say, right? That's just how it is. It's human nature. Um, Some might call it code switching because that's what it is. You don't act the same way, right? If everyone you knew saw you all at the same time, you would act on your best behavior. Your friends probably would too. There's probably things they wouldn't say either, right? Pick a group of friends you're going to be honest with, and especially as a Christian, that you're going to be honest with and that you can talk to, right? Don't pick people who you know are just there to have a good time because it's all good to have a good time, but then there's times where you're not going to have a good time, right? There's people that you don't want to get into arguments with. I can name in my hand a plethora of friends I could not get into an argument with. When I say I could not, I mean as in if something happened, we just didn't talk, right? For like however long. But getting back to it, it is not only important that we pick who we become friends with, whether or not they're Christian or not. Um, it's important that we pick friends who are especially Christian. And I don't just say that because Christian, it's oh my gosh, Christians, yay, more Christian. Like, right? That's not why I'm saying it. I'm saying it because if someone who actually is a Christian becomes your friend, they're going to do their best to respect you, and vice versa. You should do your best to respect them. I'm not saying you shouldn't respect people who aren't Christian, but I'm letting you know that they're going to put that above else because that's what God told us to do. Someone who isn't Christian, they don't honestly care at the end of the day how much they respect you 24/7. They might not want to hurt your feelings, but at the same time, there are plenty of times they would just respect you. And I think we all know what that feels like. For example, when someone makes a joke about you that you just don't think is cool, but you just kind of blush it off anyway because, oh, they're just being stupid, right? And vice versa for you, for them. Um, it's not only important we pick who our friends are because of what they say and how they act, but because of simply what they believe in. Someone who believes in God, trusts in God, follows God, is not going to be as manipulative as someone who doesn't, right? And another thing too to put into account is that the devil is like a lion on the prowl. Like one of the jokes I saw on Instagram Reels, which I'm rarely on nowadays, rarely, so rarely on, and I'm glad about that, so happy about that, is a snapping turtle. This snapping turtle was lurking over a goldfish. I don't know why a snapping turtle and a goldfish were in the same enclosure, but they were. This snapping turtle sat there for about 35 seconds waiting for the goldfish. And the thing is, the snapping turtle has a tongue that looks like a worm. So it wiggles his tongue around to allure prey. And that's what the devil does. He really does act like that. He acts like an animal waiting for prey. And if you've ever seen a predator wait for prey, it is actually insane how patient they are. It is insane how patient they are. They will sit there and wait. They will wait for however long it takes because they are ultimately just looking to pounce on you. This snapping turtle sat there for 35 seconds waiting for the goldfish to get that much closer. He was doing it to the point where he knew there was no chance the goldfish would get away. And the devil will do the same thing. He will get you in situations he knows you have no chance of getting away from, so that you will get hurt. You'll feel something, right? You'll get upset at that person. You'll have sore feelings, right? And this is the same way with people. He will get you close to people just so that he can have them pounce on you. And that's really how it is, right? To be honest with you, me and Victoria didn't start off bad. We were chilling at first, right? In a one-on-one conversation, Tori was completely normal. Victoria was completely normal in a one-on-one conversation. Completely normal. But as soon as there was another person, somehow, some way, an argument would always start. As soon as there was one person, somehow, some way, right? So I'll end off with this. And I'll leave a couple scriptures as well to reference what I am talking about, right? So the first scripture that we're going to be talking about is going to be in Timothy, 2 Timothy. And it says, don't have anything to do with foolish and stupid arguments because you know they produce quarrels, right? So what does that mean? Like I said, if you notice that you were having a conversation or an argument, debate really, because arguments are fine, but it's when an argument becomes bad faith or good faith. If you notice you're having an argument and it's starting to shift towards a bad faith argument, where the person just wants to argue with you because they're upset now, don't indulge in that. And if you know someone will do that with you, don't indulge them. Simply just don't hang out with them. I know it's difficult sometimes, but you really just need to separate yourself from them. Back in the day, if you were a foolish person, people would not hang around you because they didn't want to have anything to do with you. And it's not because of the situation of, oh, everyone hates me. No, it's a situation of no one wants to be around you because you always start quarrels and arguments, which, like I mentioned to you, Victoria, since she continuously did that, no one talked to her anymore. I don't know if anyone talks to her anymore at all, honestly. But she did it to everybody. And because everyone understood that she was doing that, they didn't want to talk to her anymore. So don't surround yourself with people like that. Don't engage in arguments that with people who you know can't take it. And it's very easy to tell whether or not, I feel like, I don't know, for me, I pick up real quick on who I can argue with and who I can't argue with. Because like I said, not looking to argue with people, but I understand off the bat, just based on how they talk, their mannerisms, whatever, this person is not someone to be hanging around with, and I'm just going to talk to them, and then leave it at that, right? A lot of you might experience that at work, right? You will know someone who has a certain presence about them that you can tell that if one thing is said, it's up in the air, right? That's the first thing. Another verse, and give me a second here. Another verse that we can look at is Titus 3:9. Avoid foolish debates, for they are unprofitable and worthless, right? And this is yet again, this hammers the nail down real nicely. There's going to be a lot of times where just, I'm telling you now, if you're similar to me, you understand exactly what I'm saying. There are going to be a lot of times where you have arguments with people and the arguments kind of just end stupidly. Like I can name a time where me and my friends are arguing or not, whether an iPad is a tablet or it's its own inherent thing, because, yada, 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 right? That was the argument. Whether an iPad is a tablet or it's an iPad, like they say it is, and it's completely separate from a tablet. But yeah, no, you're going to have a lot of arguments in life, whether they're based on Christianity or whether they're based on simple opinions. But you really need to be careful about how you go about them because those shape your character, right? End of the day, you have to understand that when you argue with people, this is a chance. This is a perfect chance for the devil to sneak in and just kind of say, "Oh, I can make this guy look real bad," right? One of the biggest things that I wrote down, especially, um, the devil will do this stuff. He'll give you people to argue with, so he can make them make you mad, so you make God look bad. All right, now I'll repeat that one more time. He can make them make you mad, so you make God look bad. He will simply do that. And it works. It really does. There are a lot of people out there who aren't the greatest at arguing. And when they do argue for Christianity or when they argue in general, they look bad because the other person is a better arguer than them or the other person has whatever advantage they have, right? Maybe they have more people arguing with them, right? For those of you who have argued with more than one person, you know how difficult that is. For those of you who have argued before with someone who is smarter than you, you know how intimidating that is. And they can make you say stuff that you normally wouldn't say. And not in the sense that, you're trying to say that, in the sense that they trip you up, right? You're nervous, whatever. So yeah, this is closing in at 20 minutes. I don't want this to be too long, so I'm gonna end it here. If you actually did watch all the way through, that's awesome. But hopefully this message was important to somebody. I really think it. I really think it's a good message. A good message. So, to close it off, remember, guys, be careful who you argue with, and on top of that, be careful who you hang out with. Because if you hang out with people who are in good faith and trusting God and follow God, or even people who don't follow God but still are intelligent people, they often won't do this kind of stuff. So yeah, be careful who you argue with and be careful who you pick as your friends. Till then, I'll be praying for all you guys, and yeah, God bless.